We start tonight in Kenya, where a majority of tourists who visited Kenya's Masai Mara Game Reserve in 2013 were from China. This is the first time Asian nationals have outnumbered Western nationals in volume of visitors to the park. Masai Mara is home to one of the new 7 wonders of the modern world. Authorities say the number of Chinese visitors has increased by over 10% over the last year, reaching about 20,000 visitors. This has Asian nationals outnumbering visitors from both Europe and America. According to Kenya's tourism board, the number of Chinese visitors to Kenya grew by 4% between 2012 and 2013. This makes China one of the top 10 countries from which international tourists are sourced. KTB has predicted that tourists from China may rise anywhere from 38,000 to 100,000 in the very near future. All right, from breakthroughs in research to leveraging Africa's mobile-first information technology, 2013 saw the content of contributing science as well as making a case for why some homegrown solutions are the best answers for many of the foreign regional challenges. CCTV's Peter Wakaba now takes a closer look at the innovations that made a difference in 2013.
Among the most utilized pieces of innovation that have put Africa on the map in the year 2013 was the move in Nigeria by a social media activist to use Twitter to solve Lagos' long-suffering relationship with traffic jams. This city is home to about 21 million people, and with its population increasing by the day, endless traffic jams that stretch out for miles and last for several hours are getting worse. Captain Idoko started the Twitter handle at Giddy Traffic in 2011 to give motorists real-time traffic updates on where to go and what to avoid on the roads. By late December 2013, Giddy Traffic had over 90,000 followers and was also getting noticed by corporates, having signed a deal with Nokia, who developed an application for the Twitter handle. Africa's innovation narrative has grabbed the attention of investors and techies from all around the world. It's also the world's fastest growing mobile phone market. One country in particular, Madagascar, is relatively young in ICT, and most professionals in the industry are freelancers. By working in a common space, they can brainstorm on technology and business instead of working in isolation in their homes and offices.
The goal is to share knowledge and expand the speed of information provided by the internet, because a person who is not connected to the internet will have less know-how than 2 people with 2 different sets of information and who can share it in this space.
Back in Nigeria, Lagos, one of Africa's fastest growing metropolis, according to official estimates, produces more than 10,000 metric tons of waste daily. In the same day, it will barely get a few hours of power, forcing many inhabitants to rely on diesel generators. However, a pilot project run by the Lagos Waste Management Authority is working to generate power using methane gas extracted from rotting fruit waste and then turning it into latent power. The authority plans to have a 25 megawatt capacity over the next 5 years. That is only 1% of the 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts that they estimate Lagos needs, but it is a start.
Energy is in demand, waste is a headache. So there's a link between the headache and the demand. So if Lagos is able to convert more of its headache into that demand, then it's kind of a real smart city program. You know, the city becomes smarter, and there's a kind of a resilience that you introduce in the city programs. And that's exactly what Lagos is looking at.
The Lagos state government plans to bury one of its largest garbage sites in dirt and transform this into a green park with grass and trees built over it in future. A clear case of innovation driving power generation. Peter Wakaba, CCTV.
All right, growth in Africa is expected to pick up in 2014, according to the most recent forecast by the International Monetary Fund. The fund attributes this to a rise in investments being made on the continent. With more on this, our Washington correspondent, Daniel Renches.
It's been no secret up and down the halls of power here that the US has been slow to respond to the African growth story. But in 2013, there have been signs of a shift, including the opening of an IBM research center in Nairobi.
All the players within the tech community, from the developers to corporates to academia, are creating a network of intelligence and a better ecosystem for Kenya, for East Africa, and for people to do business.
Major US technology firms want a stake in the long-term expansion of Africa's converging IT and telecoms infrastructure, at a time when the Washington-based International Monetary Fund is forecasting 6% growth in sub-Saharan Africa for 2014. During Barack Obama's 2013 trip to Senegal, South Africa and Tanzania, the focus was on trade and investment.
The future is going to be in creating value here in Africa. It has to be a source of the kinds of products and services and imagination that is going to be the future of the 21st century.
In early 2014, sections of the US business lobby are likely to put pressure on Capitol Hill to reduce South Africa's advantages in the renewal of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which aims to reduce US trade barriers for development goals.
I think the South Africa is probably going to be facing a different environment when AGOA is renewed because of their relatively higher income, because their economy is relatively more diversified, and finally because they have a free trade agreement with the European Union.
But as US lawmakers and officials seek a more reciprocated approach to African trade, they also want to craft AGOA reform in such a way that it doesn't end up damaging trade relations with Africa as a whole. Daniel Wrenches, CCTV, Washington.
All right, as the year draws to a close, we look at the challenges that have been experienced in 2013 and those that are facing African businesses and the economy in 2014. For more on this, we're joined by Miriam Bernard, who's live for us in London. Hi, Miriam. Thank you for joining us today. Miriam, the World Bank warns of ongoing instability of growth across African countries with a need for more government incentives for business. Can we expect to see this in the new year?
G2, absolutely. In fact, there's a series of factors that investors are looking for. Capital controls are enforced to keep money in a country. And in Africa, for example, South Africa, that is, for example, strong exchange controls make it difficult and expensive for investors to move money out. Also, long-term outlook is key, but governments need to provide short-term incentives and a promise of big returns. Now, small and medium businesses now play a pivotal role in the region, viewed as an entrepreneurial revolution, if you will, with private money and the labor market on the rise. Now, Africa is in the age of consumerism, expected to be the world's leading consumer market by 2050, which means that governments will be pressured to reform policy that better supports businesses to meet that growing demand.
Okay, Miriam, how will a single currency for the EAC help to generate more activity?
Well, the hope is that policies are in place to help all 5 East African countries move into using a single currency. Now, analysts that we spoke with say it's modeled, of course, on the Eurozone's euro and intended to attract more foreign investment, especially in things like oil and gas exploration. Now, the aim is to also reduce transactional costs and remove cross-border barriers to give greater incentives for trade. And some say that on this end, there's a lot of optimism that with over 14 million people making up the EAC, it'll also reduce reliance on international aid. And the big focus for 2014 will be to lay the groundwork for the currency, synchronize monetary and fiscal policies, and establish a common central bank, reduce the issues, of course, that the European Union faces, even up until today.
All right, thank you, Miriam. We're now also joined by Angelo Coppola, who's live for us in South Africa. Thank you for joining us, Angelo. Angelo, what were the biggest challenges facing South African business this year? Was it the lack of international growth in shrinking markets, or was it the strikes?
Well, it was a combination of both, really. We know that the strikes affected the manufacturing sector to a certain extent. We also know that they affected the mining sector. There's that strike going on at Fontaine mine at the moment now.
All right, it seems that we've had some technical difficulties. We're going to move on and see if we can get back to them later. We're taking a short break now, but here's what's coming up. Zimbabwe's Indonesian plan seems the spotlight is off foreign pushout.
BizAsia. Asia means business.
All right, welcome back. We'll start in Zimbabwe, where the deadline for foreigners operating retail businesses in the country has expired. The government set a December 31st as the cutoff for foreigners to stop running businesses reserved for locals. Businesses such as retail shops, hairdressing salons, and automotive repair outlets. Ahead of the deadline, the minister in charge of Indonesian says focus has now shifted from pushing out foreigners to empowering locals to start up their own enterprises.
The recent comments come as a response to calls for broadening of the empowerment laws to stimulate economic activity. Analysts argue targeting existing businesses would not necessarily grow the economy or create more jobs.
A lot of space is in town. A lot of occupants levels are quite vacant in terms of offices, which will leave one asking what is lacking among its native Zimbabweans. Is it the need for the business model? Is it the lack of space which is taken by foreigners?
Some local traders say they have been muscled out of both shop space and business by foreigners who have the funds to pay high rentals and bring in stock. They have been clamoring for government to follow through on its threat to push out foreigners. The Indigenization and Economic Empowerment Board says enforcement of this requirement will be done in an orderly manner. Come January 1st, they will go door to door to all operators in this city, checking if they have certificates that indicate their compliance with the laws. Authorities say they have received thousands of applications from foreign business owners seeking approval to continue operating. Despite the many that have come forward, it could still prove difficult to enforce the law.
Most of the foreigners who are operating many a business are already taking positions, either in terms of changing ownership or else in terms of somehow taking a backseat while it's allowing the natives to run the show.
As the new year rings in, expectations are high here that 2014 could bring in a change of fortunes. For local traders, it's the promise of a big break, while for foreigners, it's hope for a stay of execution. Kutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
All right, let's go now to the markets to see what we've been tracking here for you at BizAfrica. We start the day today, ending the day in Nigeria, where it's up in the green at 2.12%. We move now to the JSE, which is closing today also in the green, about 0.27%. We go to the Nairobi Securities Exchange, which is also in the green at 1.08%. And lastly, we go to the EGX, which is closing tonight in the green, up 0.01%. All the markets closing a little bit higher today.